Hello and welcome to Beyond the Headlines, the future of restaurant staffing, part two. I'm Parker Milner, food editor for the Post and Courier. Last month, I was joined by Michael Shemtov of Butcher and Bee and the Daily to discuss the status of restaurant staffing and everything that's going on in the world of restaurants as it relates to hiring employees. And this month, I'm joined by Jamie Lynch, chef partner of the Fifth Street Group and alum of Bravo TV show Top Chef. The Fifth Street Group has two Charleston area restaurants under its umbrella, Church and Union and Tempest. Both are located in downtown Charleston. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. Could you tell our listeners a little bit more about your background?
Sure. What's up, Parker? Good to see you again. I kind of cut my teeth in upscale restaurants, mostly in New York, but also in San Francisco under famed chefs Michael Mina, Andrew Carmelini, and Danielle Boulud. So my pedigree is kind of with some of the, upper echelon restaurants in the country. I moved down to the South after 9/11. I was cooking in New York City and just kind of started over in the South. In 2012, opened my first restaurant with the Fifth Street Group, Five Church in Charlotte. And then over the past 10 years, we've kind of grown that brand. We actually just rebranded it as Church and Union not too long ago, and have expanded to Nashville, as well as we're about to open in Denver as well. So we're just kind of a growing group that are trying to do some great things in the hospitality business.
Yeah, and you actually opened Tempest during the pandemic. Could you talk a little bit about that process and opening a restaurant and staffing up really during the pandemic in 2020?
Sure. I highly do not recommend it. Obviously, it was not planned. We had started the plans for Tempest. For those of you that don't know, Tempest is a South Atlantic seafood focused restaurant. So we get as much of our fish and seafood from local fishermen, straight from the boats as much as possible. It's a small restaurant, about 80 seats roughly. So anyways, we started the construction and design of that restaurant pre-pandemic. And we were coming kind of to the close of the construction phase at the beginning of, right before the pandemic just started, like in January. In March, we ended up, we were kind of at the end of our construction. We had to end up having to close down our other restaurants because of the lockdowns and all that. And we, had already spent the money on the restaurant. Like the place was done. It was finished construction. So we had to try to figure out how we were going to be able to launch this, new restaurant in the midst of like all these, restrictions and limitations and, staffing issues, safety requirements. I mean, there were so many things that we were concerned about going into the opening. How do we protect our staff? How do we protect our guests? How do we convince people, to come out and give us a shot when, a lot of people, even including ourselves, were concerned about, what was going on, it was all new to everybody. So we kind of held off for a bit. We pumped the brakes. We kind of let things shake out a little bit, during the shutdowns and stuff. And once we launched the restaurant, we launched at 50% capacity. And anybody who knows restaurant margins, they're very, very slim. There's not tons of profit margin built into a hospitality model like a restaurant. So 50% margin, there's no way to really make a profit or to break even at those. So, but we gave it a shot. We really were hoping that, by having the abbreviated dining room seats, right, 50% capacity, we would really be able to focus on giving people an excellent experience, really focus on the quality of the food and highlighting where the stuff was coming from, and that eventually it would give us, the traction to get our feet under us and hopefully have a successful place, which turns out to be the case. Yeah.
Yeah, and for those who haven't been, the setting is gorgeous. The food you're putting out is really incredible too. And
Thank
could
you.
before we kind of get into the staffing conversation too, could you kind of explain your role as chef partner, what your day to
Sure.
day is like, and who is kind of in the kitchens also at Church and Union in Tempest?
Absolutely. So my role now mostly, I kind of helped build the brand, and I was the opening chef at Five Church, and I'm instrumental in kind of driving the culinary aspect of what we do forward. But my team is really the people that are in the kitchen on the day to day now, really, cooking the services, working, the window, the pass, and really making sure that guests are getting, an excellent experience. So my role now is more of a training, leadership, kind of mentorship role where, I'm 47 years old, so like I've done all the roles in the restaurant, and the legs start to get tired after a while. You can't do the 14-hour shifts. My role now is really to share all of my experiences, collectively over my career with the teams that I have in place to help them kind of, get further along in their careers faster than I was able to. I learned the hard way, how to do a lot of the management, kitchen management, chefing kind of responsibilities. So my goal is to really share as much of that with them as possible and let them kind of navigate that stuff quickly. At Church and Union in Charleston, Alex Spencer is our executive chef. She started with me. I think it's been 6 or 7 years ago now, from California. She located to Charlotte. I hired her as a sous chef, and she trained under me for many years, and started to really crave the ocean again. She wanted to get back to California. So, we had recently opened in Charleston, our other restaurant. So I kind of navigated her down to Charleston, and she fell in love with, the beach here. So we kind of wrangled her back in, and she became the leader of Church and Union in Charleston. She's doing an excellent job. Will Kammer and Tyler Cook are my kind of chefs at Tempest. These are both guys who worked for us in the past. They are young, super talented, creative chefs that, are just starting to enter the kind of chef part of their career, where they're no longer line cooks. They're now learning leadership. They're learning how to take their culinary voices and put it into a restaurant setting. And it's super exciting because they are bringing a really creative new approach to our food. And then, I kind of just come in and help guide them along the way, help them, flush out their ideas and put dishes together. So it's a really exciting time for us in Charleston.
That's great. Thanks for kind of giving that overhead view. And I want to remind everyone that recording of this event will be emailed to you if you'd like to watch again and share with your friends after. And we talk about when you talk about staffing, the first thing or that comes to mind, at least for me, is wages. And you mentioned those long, vigorous days that you spent in the kitchen, and there is, as your group has found, a wage gap between the front and the back of the house, and you're doing your best to address that with the Tip the Kitchen initiative that you launched, which has generated, the last I heard, I'm sure this is updated now, over $1 million for your back of house staff. So could you talk about how you came up with that program and how all that works out?
Totally. I'm glad you asked. So, the Tip the Kitchen initiative was an initiative that was kind of born from during the closures of our restaurants. Patrick, Waylon, Alejandro Torrio, and myself were kind of the partnership group of Fifth Street Group. We all kind of hunkered down on a debunked rental property out in Isle of Palms once all the shutdowns happened. I ended up selling my my organic farm that I lived on for, so we have some overhead capital to be able to kind of figure out, navigate the reopenings and kind of sustain us until we figured out what was going to happen. So at that time, we all lived together. We kind of like circled the wagons and really started to put our heads together about how we were going to survive the shutdowns, the pandemics, and all that. And during that process, Patrick is actually the brain trust of the Tip the Kitchen initiative. it was clear to us, even within our group, that the pay wage, there was a differential there, even amongst my pay as the executive chef of the company. And, maybe Patrick's pay as the CEO, kind of front of the house business side of things. And that's just kind of the way it's always been. And we recognize that that part of the hospitality business is broken. It's been broken forever. I've always felt undervalued as a back of the house employee. The hours that we spend versus the front of the house employee, fabricating the food and stuff that you're going to serve in a restaurant, getting paid, not enough money to live on. And that's just been the norm. So when it became clear that we would be able to reopen the restaurants, that we were going to survive the pandemic, Patrick started thinking about how we were going to address this part of the issue. We felt an obligation, probably partly because, we had to lay off our staff, which was the hardest thing that we've ever had to do. Obviously by no fault of our own. I mean, we were forced to close, and for their safety, but it was still one of the most treacherous things I think we had to go through as leaders and bosses of our business, is to let your staff go. So there was a commitment there that we had to address this wage differential and inequality situation as part of our model moving forward. We didn't want to reopen our businesses and just say, okay, we're reopened, now we can feed people again. I think for us as restaurateurs and hospitalitarians is like, we are in this for a bigger purpose. We're here to serve people. We're here to show people hospitality. And we felt an obligation to try to push the restaurant and hospitality business forward. That's kind of where the seed of the tip the kitchen came from. And then Patrick went to work looking at different models, things that have been done in the past. There were a bunch of restaurants that we respected in New York that tried to abolish tips altogether and just pay people flat wages, like salaries. We looked at models like that. We determined they wouldn't work because we would have to raise our prices to include all of this, salary increases, which in turn would end up pricing out many of our guests. People that like to come and enjoy our restaurants and not spend an arm and a leg to have a nice meal. So we weren't willing to do that. We had to look at more creative ways to do this. And what we came up with, and this was Patrick's idea, was to somehow partner with our guests to help increase the pay for our back of the house employees, at the same time not penalizing our front of the house employees by having to share tips. And so what we came up with was, adding a tip line to our checks for our guests, and clearly state on our menus what the intent is. And what that states on our menu is that, we urge our guests, if they have a truly spectacular experience, if they have a food experience that really speaks to them, and they feel inclined to share a little bit with the back of the house, for the kitchen staff, to be shared amongst all the kitchen staff equally. We as ownership will partner with them by matching all of those tips per shift, per day, up to $500 a day from the ownership. So let's say, the back of the house earns $200 one particular day. We'll put $200 into the pot, equaling $400, and then that will get paid to the people that work that day, equally in the back of the house. The real challenging part of this was, how do we address people that split their tips up, right? Typically, a server will make 15 to 20%, something like that on a check. That's kind of industry standards. So what if they split it? What if they leave, some for the back of the house to be generous, and then they leave half for the front of the house? Well, front of the house employees will look at that as being penalized by having to share with the back of the house. So we call it a stopgap. The front of the house employees tip up to 21%. So, and that's on a split check. So the front of the house employee, in essence, could earn more by sharing tips, considering they might only get a tip of 18% or 16%. Well, we stopgap it up to 20, 21%, which means they automatically they get a better tip by sharing. So what we found is that creates a sense of kind of camaraderie. They're kind of in this together, right? By sharing they're not sharing the tips but by the guest, splitting the tips up, they actually do better as a group. And that's kind of the essence of it. And to update your total, it's up to date is 1.26 million so far for company wide.
Wow.
Yeah.
You must have someone that's pretty good at math on staff to kind of
that's Patrick
read through all these numbers.
That's 100% Patrick Whalen. He's the spreadsheet tracking wizard.
Yeah. And I won't ask you to comment on tipping itself, but have you talked to other restaurateurs in the business, maybe in other parts of the world that where tipping isn't a thing that they do, and just kind of about how that works at their restaurants when they do just kind of raise the prices and eliminate tipping altogether?
Yeah. So, I haven't heard from a ton of people about that don't tip at all. We have spoke to a lot of restaurateurs that are interested in kind of our model and how it works, because there are a lot of steps to it to make it work effectively. And we've given a lot of thought to those to make sure that it's fair, both to the staff, but also to us as owners. Like we can't, we have to be careful. At the end of the day, we need to be sure that the restaurant is profitable so that we can expand and grow this initiative. If we just end up, giving all the money to staff and we end up running out, we got to close the restaurants, and that doesn't help anyone. So we are very cognizant of making sure that it's balanced, that we're putting, people before profits. I mean, that's super important to make sure that, but the profits are important to the business. So that's an important part. We have shared with a lot of restaurateurs that are interested in like how it works. Many people have asked us, how has this initiative raised our overall operational costs? Because I think that's a great question, right? It does cost us more money to do this system. And I think what we've come up with is that it's about a 1.5% increase in overall costs if you factor in the deduction in training costs, because we have a lot less turnover now. Our staff are very happy. This is benefiting them in an amazing way. There's a lot of stories online and social media from our staff about how it's affecting them personally and how it's changed kind of the game for them as an employee. So our turnover has dropped dramatically. And as a result, those costs that are related to turnover, training, waste, uniforms, like all these things that add up, if you deduct those from the overall cost, we believe it's around 1.5% cost to us as a business to do the initiative. And I think that's been, that alone speaks volumes to other restaurateurs. Are like, okay, cool. This isn't, it's not a 3% commitment on my end to pay my staff more, because that 3% is the difference between, being profitable and not,
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned those tight margins at the beginning of our conversation. And so have you found that you mentioned you've retained more staff? So this initiative and what you were doing has enabled you to be fully staffed or mostly fully staffed throughout the last year or so?
Yeah. So straight out of the gate, so we started the initiative, I believe it was in April of last year, I think. So we have got almost a year of data on this. And it was a little slow going at the first couple months. I mean, most people thought we were crazy. We got a lot of people that were like hitting us up on social media saying, you guys are out of your minds. What are you doing? Right. It's not going to work or whatever. And our employees, I think, were reluctant to believe in it, right? Because it was new. They didn't understand how it worked. It took us a long time to prove it, honestly, just like to execute it and show people that it works. But now we're fully staffed. We have some turnover. I would like to be slightly more staffed. I think business is going to continue to improve now that restrictions are low and infections are very low. I think we're going to start to really see a surge in people wanting to go out and have an experience. So we're looking actively to fill our staffs up, but we are not short staffed, which has been amazing, because I think what a lot of restaurants suffered from because of the staffing crisis and not having staff is that they weren't able to handle the surge in volume. When people came out in droves to like get out of their houses, to have an experience, to sense a little bit of normalcy, their staffs weren't able to handle that kind of surge. And as a result, I think some of their operations suffered. The food quality, the service quality suffered, and there was a lot of lashback that I saw on social media from guests saying, whoa, what's up? We didn't really suffer from that so much because we had a lot of staff and we were able to keep staff. So yeah, it's been working great. Our feedback from our staff is amazing. Yeah.
And I want to remind everyone that you can submit questions for Jamie using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We did get some in before this conversation. One person wanted to know how restaurant prices might be impacted if, say, employees were salaried or something of that nature.
Right. Restaurant, our plate costs and alcohol costs would go through the roof. I think right now, the thing about our models of our restaurants is that we plan our menus strategically so that a guest can either come in and have, a Church and Union burger and a beer or a glass of wine or something, and get out of the restaurant for around $20-25, and then maybe a tip. Or they could come in and have a 3-course, special occasion meal, and spend $150 a person. We plan for that. We want that to be able to offer both of those experiences to our guests. If I had to charge $35 for a burger, that would price out a huge section of my clientele or our guests that expect to be able to come into the bar, have a quick lunch in a great atmosphere with cool staff. Those people would go somewhere else. They'd go to some fast casual, quick service type place. So I think what you would see is that I don't have a number. I didn't have the numbers on the inflation of that. If we as a group paid everybody $25 an hour, as a flat salary, what we would have to do actively to our dish prices to that, but it would be significant.
Yeah. It would totally change just the entire pricing dynamic, I would imagine.
Totally.
Like you said,
100%.
Certain dishes would just become, go to a different level.
Right. And don't forget also, like right now we're battling supply chain issues. It's everything from carrots for our stock, if we make soup from, to the beef and the steak that we put as center of the plate items. There are shortages across the board. It's a daily situation where, our chefs are checking in our orders when they arrive, and the things that we order aren't coming in. It's like they have to check it every day to see, well, what did we get today? We ordered all this stuff, but a third of it isn't available. And so we're having to really shift and pivot. So, that's affecting our margins as well. We have not passed that along to our guests yet. I fear that might be something that we have to do, in the coming months until the supply chain shake out. So, we're reserving, the need to inflate pricing until we really have to. A lot of restaurants are raising prices across the board right now, 15%, 10%, 20%, whatever they're doing to because of the supply chain. Now, if you added a standardized salary on top of that, it would be too much. I think it might ruin the restaurant business, honestly.
Mhm. Another question we had before, and both of your Charleston restaurants are downtown. A listener wanted to know, what have the restaurants downtown done to attract and retain staff? He or she says, as a former restaurant owner, I offered double the salary restaurants downtown were offering and had above applicants. Most workers do not live downtown, so they had to pay out extra to travel and live further out to afford rents. And I know some have mentioned parking as well in the past. So have you had any issues with kind of the downtown restaurant ownership?
Yeah. I mean, we haven't really so much. I mean, parking is an issue. Parking's an issue for me. I mean, I have to deal with it as well. Unfortunately, that's something that's out of our control. But what I have found through talking with my staff and the initiatives that we've put into place, with the increased financial input to our staff, they are. I think it's less of a burden for them now. Like those parking costs, whether it's, some people who didn't have transportation before have now gotten, bought in a car or a scooter or whatever they've decided to do with their new kind of pay. And it has opened up different avenues for them to be able to get to work and manage without having to think about, those costs affecting their other kind of expenses, So I think what we're doing has helped. Unfortunately, we don't really have a parking lot. I wish we did. That would be amazing, because
You wouldn't be the only one. Yeah.
Yeah. I think everybody downtown is suffering from the parking thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like we have time for one more question here, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, but how has the tip the kitchen initiative helped the morale between the front of house staff and the back of the house staff, and how are they working together as a group at the restaurants?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's probably the thing that I'm most proud of in my career to this point. The back of the house staff is feeling valued, for a time where, in many of the restaurants that I came up in, it was about the information that you were getting from the chefs was why you were there, right? It wasn't about the pay, it was about the experience. Our staff in the back of the house is feeling valued. They're feeling looked out for and cared for by the restaurant and by the guests, by them sharing. The front of the house staff has, they have seen the benefits of this for the back of the house. The product that they're serving has improved. The quality of the food is better. So for them, they feel, I think they feel more pride in the product that they're serving. I think that we've always done an amazing job. I really pride ourselves on that, but I think it's even better now. When I go into the restaurants and I audit the food and stuff, I'm really impressed with the quality that we're putting out on a consistent basis. And so I think that helps the front of the house servers. Nobody wants to serve stuff that they don't believe in. They will if it pays their bills, but I think it makes it a more sense of pride to be able to do it with confidence. So that really helps, and as a result, they look at themselves as a team rather than as a back of the house, front of the house kind of segregated employees.
Yeah, and when does the education between the back of the house and the front of the house kind of happen? Whenever the chefs are explaining the dishes, does that happen kind of the morning before the service, or are those talks just always continuing?
They're continuing, yeah. So we have them. So we have structured pre-shift meetings before every shift, and that usually happens for dinner service. It'll be around 4:30. Dinner service starts at 5. So, the servers and the chefs will get together. We'll present dishes to them, say, hey, this is what we got, features tonight or whatever. The chefs will talk about, dishes on the menu that, maybe they haven't talked about in a while, just to refresh people on what's going on. And then we share that with the front of the house staff, answer questions, let them taste, and try to keep everybody kind of engaged.
Yeah. Well, Jamie, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It was just a really enlightening conversation. For all the listeners, I want to invite you all to subscribe to either our free food and dining newsletter. You can do that by visiting postandcourier.com/newsletter dash sign up. And we'd also love you to follow our new Charleston's menu newsletter. You can visit postandcourier.com/chs menu to find that new newsletter. Thank you all again for watching, and you can subscribe to the Post and Courier by visiting postandcourier.com/subscribe. Thank you and have a good day.